episode of Miraculous Thinking. I'm your host, Elenique Marie, and with me is my beautiful co-host, Crystal Ann Compton. And today we're coming to you with chapter 3 of Feeling is the Secret, entitled Prayer. And boy, am I ready for this.
Me too.
And we've been talking that this is so juicy and powerful, yet so intense and short that we've actually decided that Crystal's going to read it.
Yeah.
So
We're
in case you
gonna have
didn't
a
get to
reading.
read it, right, before we started, just in case, you're going to get it anyway.
Well, and the reason I felt compelled to do it is because I believe, just having worked with Neville for so many years, that when he was speaking in a lecture or when he was writing, he was actually laying down activations and attunements. And so sometimes just in the reading of it, I can feel myself kind of getting altered a little bit. And I think when we're present with what Neville is saying, we are receptive to adjusting so that we can do the thing, we can manifest. So I think it's really helpful, actually. That's why we've been quoting it these last couple of weeks and actually pulling out the words because I think they're so meaningful. And so, yes, we're going to read it. It's very short. It'll probably be less than 10 minutes, but we do want to ask you as we are reading just to kind of get comfy. I mean, you can be in your car and comfy. That's fine. This isn't a meditation, but do just get comfortable and try to be in terms of your intention, try to be as present with the words as possible and just follow along and feel the energy of them as we go through them. But before we do even that, we've always got a little bit of housekeeping we want to talk about. And the first thing we wanted to mention is that we're actually going to change it up a little bit. Originally, we were going to do Neville Goddard, Feeling is the Secret, in September, which we have done. And then November was going to be the Kybalion, which we're going to get to, but we thought it would maybe be a better fit. And maybe Elenique, you can speak to this. Instead of doing the Kybalion, which is again addressing the universal laws, instead let's get to the Four Agreements, because the Four Agreements is prepared pretty foundationally as well, kind of like Feeling is the Secret. Tell us what you think about that.
Well, absolutely. I think what's incredible about the Four Agreements is that what we're doing is now we understand a little bit about universal law. Neville has told us some techniques, but sometimes there's some things that get in the way of being able to utilize these techniques. And that pretty much is our conditioning, right? So we thought that it would be beneficial to say, hey, let's take a minute. Let's deal with what's going on within us potentially, which is what the Four Agreements does. It really allows you to start working on the triggers as they come up. Because the more you work with those triggers and heal them and release them, then you're finally able to get in the correct energy so that you can allow and attract that which you want to attract.
Yes.
So we've decided to create that little pit stop through, spring cleaning of our souls and minds before we continue on to the deeper or extension of these already very deep universal laws that we're discussing.
Perfect. Okay, so if you do not have the Four Agreements at this time and you want to follow along as we discuss it, do go and get a copy. Maybe you can get a used copy, or you can go on Amazon and get yourself a copy so that you can follow along as we begin starting the first week of October, which is coming right up.
Right around the corner.
We are almost through with Feeling is the Secret.
It's crazy.
It is, but we've been having fun. I don't know. We've been having a lot of fun.
Too much.
Too much fun. The other thing we wanted to remind you that we do have an email account. If you want to reach out and talk to us, give us some of your comments, feedback, and or ask questions, please feel free to do that by just writing us at miraculousthinking@gmail.com, right? Yeah, one word, Miraculous Thinking. I have so many email accounts. I don't know if you know that about me. I also have so many domains. It's hard to keep everything together. So it's Miraculous Thinking, one word, @gmail.com. Send us a letter. We read everything. If you are following along on YouTube, then you can also leave a comment. We will check the comments there. And thank you, because we've received some very encouraging feedback here and there. We're very small, but we're going to be growing. But people seem to like it, Elenique.
It's inevitable.
It is. We're growing, honey. It's going to happen, babe. And if you're listening on the pod and you haven't checked us out on YouTube, you're missing out because you can see our face balls. right? You
Yes,
can see her
baseball.
eyes. You can see this.
Connect.
And please subscribe and like and comment and interact with us on YouTube, because that does help us in the algorithm. And as far as the podcast, if you would be so kind to just leave us a review, a good one would be great. But I mean,
Yeah.
we don't want to coerce you or anything like that.
No.
A good
No pressure.
review would be so fantastic. Thank you so very much in advance. And the other thing we wanted to remind you about is that we kind of changed how we're doing meditations and supplemental content. Instead of building that into this episode, which we did, I think, just the first time, or is it first and second time? I don't know.
I think it was just the first time, and then the
Okay.
second time we did, you separated it out into two different.
You're right. We're only on the
Yeah.
third chapter. Thank you.
This is it. Yeah.
Keep me in line, Elenique. I'm too astral. So instead of including the meditation or the supplemental content in this episode, we are going to have an additional episode if you're listening via pod, and it's going to be 4A, I think it would be 4A, and it says meditation and a title, and all you have to do is just go right into it. We're not going to be introducing it. It goes right to the meditation. So make sure if you're listening to the meditations that you are in a comfortable place, that you are not driving, that you have the ability to be present with that work. And last but not least, well, Elenique, why don't you talk to us about the ebook that is going to be coming up next week?
We are so excited about this ebook because as we were doing the course, discussing the book, I was thinking, and Crystal and I were speaking that, how do we help people create this, utilize it? Because, so many of us, we consume so much content, but then we don't use it. So we are masters of nothing. And I think, there's so many paths, right? Can you relate to this?
Yes.
I'm still dealing with that, pasta making machine that I bought that I was
haven't
really
even
excited
taken
about.
it out of the box. It's just, I know it's there.
So we said, okay, it takes about 21 days to really, make a habit stick. But we are going to start you off with a 14-day journey into manifestation made easy, utilizing some of the best techniques from Neville Goddard. And we're going to have a beautiful morning ritual, daytime ritual, and evening ritual, which you can utilize for 14 days and just really start to watch your life transform. So when we finish up our last chapter of Neville next week, it will be available for those of you that subscribe, that join our Facebook group. You'll be able to just download it, download the ebook for your use, and feel free to share.
We are so awesome. I have to say,
a little bit.
I'm so great at being humble. No, but I just
are.
feel like the conversations themselves are so substantial, and we give ourselves the latitude to get into some really interesting areas. And the content we are covering is so intentional. Like, these are books that have changed our lives, and some that we're so excited to get into. And then to have like additional meditations that or rituals and protocols that we might be offering as well. Like, that's also such a bonus and so wonderful to help embed the things we're talking about.
Yes.
And then in addition to that, we're going to have an ebook, and I'm sure this won't be the first one that we will offer. Nope. So there's just a lot of content, and we're really offering this to you so that you can get excited about your spiritual walk and live your life in a spiritually evidential way. Like, as opposed to saying, yeah, I believe in that, like living the belief that you have about yourself and what's possible in this world. That's where we all want to be. And so all of this content is being created for you so that we can share that with you.
Absolutely.
I'm I'm excited about it, my friend.
Me too.
Is there anything else housekeeping related that we have to talk about? I don't think so.
I think that's everything.
Well, then let's get into Neville.
Let's do it.
Let us not delay. All right, so we are in chapter 3 of Feeling is the Secret by Neville Goddard. And you're going to hear the cadence of my voice begin to change. And I'm not trying to hypnotize you or anything, but it just is the way that it happens when I read Neville. And again, I think it's because these are energetic and electric sentences and words that we're going to be going over. Just kind of get present with what we're going to be talking about. Again, this chapter is entitled Prayer, and I love it, Elenique, because this isn't the prayer, that the kind of prayer that your grandma taught you about, unless you had a really cool grandma. Some of us
Yes.
did. This
Yeah.
is not your conventional traditional prayer. This is a different kind of prayer. So, thinking caps on, listening ears forward. Okay. All right, here we go. Prayer, like sleep, is also an entrance into the subconscious. Quote, when you pray, enter into your closet. And when you have shut your door, pray to your Father, which is in secret, and your Father, which is in secret, shall reward you openly. End quote. Neville says, prayer is an illusion of sleep, which diminishes the impression of the outer world and renders the mind more receptive to suggestion from within. The mind in prayer is in a state of relaxation and receptivity akin to the feeling attained just before dropping off to sleep, which we know, Elenique, is hypnagogia. That's that drowsy kind of dreamy state that we're in right before sleep.
Yes.
Neville goes on to say, prayer is not so much what you ask for as how you prepare for its reception. Can I just say that again? Prayer is not so much what you ask for as how you prepare for its reception. Quote, whatsoever things you desire, when you pray, believe that you have received them and you shall have them. End quote. The only condition required is that you believe that your prayers are already realized. Your prayer must be, has to be, is guaranteed to be answered if you assume the feeling that would be yours were you already in possession of your objective. The moment you accept the wish as an accomplished fact, the subconscious finds means for its realization. To pray successfully, then, you must yield to the wish, that is, feel the wish fulfilled. The perfectly disciplined man is always in tune with the wish as an accomplished fact. He knows that consciousness is the one and only reality, that ideas and feelings are actually facts of consciousness and are as real as objects in space. Therefore, he never entertains a feeling which does not contribute to his happiness. For feelings are the causes of the actions and circumstances of his life. Now, on the other hand, the undisciplined man finds it difficult to believe that which is denied by the senses, and usually accepts or rejects solely on appearances of the senses. Because of this tendency to rely on the evidence of the senses, it is necessary to shut them out before starting to pray, before attempting to feel that which they deny. That's a heavy sentence. Remind me, Elenique, let's go back to that after we're done. Neville goes on to say, whenever you are in the state of mind of, I should like to, but I cannot, the harder you try, the less you are able to yield to the wish. You never attract that which you want, but you always attract that which you are conscious of being. Prayer is the art of assuming the feeling of being and having that which you want. When the senses confirm the absence of your wish, all conscious effort to counteract this suggestion is futile and tends to intensify the suggestion. Prayer is the art of yielding to the wish and not forcing the wish. Whenever your feeling is in conflict with your wish, feeling will be the victor. I'm going to say that again because it's so important. Whenever your feeling is in conflict with your wish or that which you seek to manifest, feeling will be the victor. The dominant feeling invariably expresses itself. Prayer must be without effort. In attempting to fix an attitude of mind which is denied by the senses, effort is fatal. To yield successfully to the wish as an accomplished fact, you must create a passive state, a kind of reverie or meditative reflection similar to the feeling which precedes sleep. In such a relaxed state, the mind is turned from the objective world and easily senses the reality of a subjective state. It is a state in which you are conscious and quite able to move or open your eyes, but you have no desire to do so. An easy way to create this passive state is to relax in a comfortable chair or on a bed. If on a bed, lie flat on your back with your head on a level with your body. Close the eyes and imagine that you are sleepy. Feel, I am sleepy, so very sleepy. In a little while, a faraway feeling, accompanied by a general lassitude and loss of all desire to move, will envelop you. You feel a pleasant, comfortable rest and not inclined to alter your position, although under other circumstances you would not be at all comfortable. When this passive state is reached, imagine that you have realized your wish, not how it was realized, but simply the wish fulfilled. Imagine in picture form what you desire to achieve in life. Then feel yourself as having already achieved it. Thoughts produce tiny little speech movements which may be heard in the passive state. Elenique, I'm going to want you to opine on that in a moment. Thoughts produce tiny little speech movements which may be heard in the passive state of prayer as pronouncements from without. Okay, I botched that a little bit. Let me read that one more time. I'm sorry. Thoughts produce tiny little speech movements which may be heard in the passive state of prayer as pronouncements from without. However, this degree of passivity is not essential to the realization of your prayers. And here's the mic drop. All that's necessary is to create a passive state and feel the wish fulfilled. All you can possibly need or desire is already yours. You need no helper to give it to you. It is yours now. Call your desires into being by imagining and feeling your wish fulfilled. As the end is accepted, you become totally indifferent as to possible failure, for acceptance of the end wills the means to that end. When you emerge from the moment of prayer, it is as though you were shown the happy and successful end of a play, although you were not shown how that end was achieved. However, having witnessed the end, regardless of any anticlimactic sequence, you remain calm and secure in the knowledge that the end has been perfectly defined. Amen and amen.
Amen.
So many good chunks in there.
Oh my gosh.
Before we talk a little bit about prayer and drill down into this, what was the section I wanted you?
You said when it says, because of this tendency to rely on the evidence of the senses, it is necessary to shut them out before starting to pray, before attempting to feel that which they deny. That was the first one that you mentioned.
So can you clarify for us? I know we talked about it a little bit last week, the evidence of the senses and what that actually means.
Mm-hmm. Well, so there's different levels to this, right? Because your senses give you information through many means. You have the eyes, you have the ears, you have touch, right? You have sensing, even if you want to consider the sixth sense, like what you think that you know and you don't know how you know. So, what he's saying here, we rely too heavily on the senses. The senses can only tell us what is already out here in objective reality. They cannot show us what we are creating with our desire. So we need to pull our attention away from what is outside. We need to stop assuming that what is outside is the truth. And we have to believe that what we are creating within us is what is truly real, as the outside is only a symptom of a cause, right?
Mm-hmm. It is the effect, right?
Right, is the effect, exactly. So I believe he's saying that. So it's that he's saying it is necessary to shut them out before starting to pray. So before you sit down to pray, you need to, that's why prayer usually we consider that you are in a quiet space, alone, without distractions, without noises, without anything to interfere into this place very, very within that you're about to enter. And then before attempting to feel that which they deny. So what is it that they are denying? That wish that you have. So if you want to feel light and thin, and at the current moment, you are carrying some pounds that you don't want.
How dare you?
Yeah. Okay, but the senses are saying, no, you're not that person. You're not that energetic, thinner version of you. You are this person that is uncomfortably, has some pounds that you don't
Well,
want.
your own scale is saying that, right? The
Yes.
evidence
And
of the
your
senses.
bones and your
Mm-hmm.
joints might be
Mm-hmm.
saying, ouch, I have this extra weight on my knee and that's when my knee hurts. So if you focus on what those senses are telling you, those senses are contradicting your wish. The wish is, I want to feel light and airy and energetic and thinner. So you have to shut out those senses because the senses will deny that your wish is possible.
Right.
That's
So,
how I interpret that.
and that's exactly right. And thank you, because I think you simplified that. What do you think of Neville's talking about like lying down in a bed with your head level, and normally you wouldn't be comfortable, you wouldn't want to stay there, but because you're doing this work, you're going to, is that a complication in your mind of what needs to happen in order for you to get into state, or is that about right?
I think that he's probably working on some energetic principles, although I have found that sitting vertically is usually the way that I can get into a state much quicker because I feel like I'm aligning with the core of the earth and with the natural field that is around a human being and around the earth. But he has his philosophies, and I'm sure that it works for
Mm-hmm.
him. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, there's many paths to get to the same place. And for some people, lying down on their bed is going to work best for them. And for some people, standing up will work best for them. But actually, for some people, walking around in nature will
Mm-hmm.
work best for them because now we know that we are so individuated as people that what is a meditative state to me or peaceful to me might be a nightmare to you, right? So I think that we don't have to get caught up in these details. You can try it and see if it works for you. But if it doesn't, feel free to experiment with it.
Yes, and I think it was Albert Einstein who, while he was meditating and in this passive state, he wasn't fully asleep. I don't think it was a dream. I think he was in active imagination. So he was in the passive state and he was allowing his imagination to roam in order to come up with a solution. And he ultimately did, and it was the theory of relativity. But I think he liked to sit in a chair, but a comfy one, so he can
Right.
get real comfortable and he can let down, like the
Mm-hmm.
body's relaxed, but he's not lying down, so he's not going to fall asleep. So he strategically placed his body, which I think is good to hear all of this because it gives us permission to find out what works for you. And you hit the nail on the head with me. Like when I'm out in nature, which is already high vibration, and I'm walking around and I'm being mindful and I'm connecting with nature, or I'm out by the cows, that's so spiritual for me. And I can
Mm-hmm.
find myself in a passive state. And here he does say that you don't have to do all this stuff. You don't really have to do all of the things like lie in a bed. All that's necessary is to get into that state, however you
Mm-hmm.
get into it, and then feel that the wish is fulfilled.
Exactly. And I think that's where we understand so much more that our path is our own. And we don't have to do it the way somebody else does it. It may not work for you. And
Hmm.
then what ends up happening is we beat ourselves up because we did it wrong. You didn't do it wrong. It wasn't tweaked to you. So
Right.
feel free to play around because all of this, he uses the word play in here a couple of times, I think, in this book, but it's this idea of playfulness, right? You cannot force it, allow it, surrender to it. And playing is like that, right? We're playing with this idea, we're enjoying it, we're not attached to the outcome. So I think that's very important. Let's just let go of the expectation.
Whatever gets you there is getting you there. And that is the
Exactly.
point. Like he does
Exactly.
say that prayer must be without effort. And I thought this would be a good thing to maybe drill down into because
Hmm.
I've been to Catholic churches, I've been to Pentecostal churches, and both pray in very different ways. But it does
Yes.
seem like a lot of efforting, actually. Let me
Hmm.
light a candle, let me do my rosaries, let me do all the rituals and all the things that I have to do in order to get into maybe a state of worthiness that will allow
Hmm.
my prayer to be heard. This entire chapter to me is just screaming, don't pray like that. Don't ever
Hmm.
go into pray and have a supplication or something that you want and come into that transaction as a beggar, as
Right.
somebody less than. And we grew
Hmm.
up with the hymn Amazing Grace that saved a wretch like me.
Hmm.
So we've been kind of programmed to see ourselves inherently less than the divine. an
Yes.
inherently less than source that created us. And we could have that conversation and it would be interesting. But the point I think Neville is making is that it shouldn't be hard. You shouldn't be trying a lot. You shouldn't be thinking about how it's going to happen. I know I want this thing, but how's the universe going to manage that? And
Hmm.
you have to have this state of flow, which
Yes.
to me is the state of God. It's the state of creation. It's a movement and action. It's moving towards something. And you are the creator of that. You are dictating where that flow is going. You don't want to stop the flow by getting in your own way because you think you're a wretch or that you need to beg God. God is asking you to enter into his courts with praise and
Hmm.
thanksgiving and with joy and high vibration and embodied. That is what prayer is.
Yes. And I think that what you described with the ritual, um, there's a place for everything, and some people are
Yes.
ritualistic, right? So there's people that are very traditional, and when Christmas comes, they want to do the typical things that you do in Christmas, right? The advent calendar and the socks go here, and we're going to make the eggnog, and they're not going to get out of that script. But that script for them is almost like priming them to take them to a spiritual experience. Sometimes the way a relationship can be, right? When you know you're going to have a hot date and you're like, okay, I'm gonna shave my legs. I'm gonna get my hair cut. I'm gonna get my
You
nails
lucky
did,
guy.
right? So you're gonna go do all those things, but they are these little rituals that we do that are priming us for what is coming, right? So I think that there can be a place, depending on your
Yes.
personality,
Yes.
to utilize ritual as a means of something that builds anticipation and joy. As
Yes.
opposed to having
Yes.
it be sort of like those, what are those things called in the bowling alley when you throw the ball and it holds the ball so the ball doesn't go into the
The
gutters?
I don't
The ones
know,
that they
but I
use for
do
little
know it. Yes.
kids. So
Yes.
I feel like sometimes people feel like prayer has to be like that in traditional religion. It's like, no, you cannot get out of these two guardrails. That's what it
Hmm.
is.
Hmm.
The guardrails, right? So I personally love ritual, but I like to utilize it with joy and levity
It is
and
all
not with it.
about like your state as you're doing it. If you're,
Yes.
well, actually, coming from Pentecostalism, and then my second husband was Catholic. His whole family were Catholics, but they were the kind of Catholics that loved being Catholic, whereas so many of the Catholics I meet are real angry about having been Catholic,
Yes.
but they loved being Catholic. And I really was able to experience the pageantry and the meaningfulness of lighting a candle or the rosary, which I've got rosaries right there from my mother and from other family members. And I think if you're entering into the ritual, allowing yourself to go passive, allowing yourself to be present with what that symbolizes versus doing the damn thing, because if I don't do this,
Right.
then I don't get there. It's all about the way you're viewing
Yes.
yourself in that interaction. And I think
Absolutely.
ritual is so beautiful.
Yes.
Hmm.
I love it. And I remember as a Catholic, I would say recovering Catholic, but I one of my favorite prayers, and looking back, I wonder what this says about my psyche was, the part in the creed where they say, Lord, I am not worthy to receive you, but only say the word and I shall be healed. And I used to say that like with every inch and every cell of my body because I just felt deeply how imperfect I was. And I'm like, God, please, do you hear what I'm saying? I'm saying, please, only you have the power. I know I'm not worthy. You say that before communion, right? I know I'm not worthy, but just say the word and I shall be healed. And so it's a bittersweetness because there's a humility in it where you're saying to God, um, I know I have a ways to go. But then there's this other aspect to it, which is where you're, like you said, why are you not worthy to receive your own father, to receive that which you are, to vibrate with that? Where is that coming from? And what does having a belief like that do to your capacity to actually connect with your father?
Right.
Right? Because if you think you're
Mm.
not good enough, you're going to have that relationship like even in the world in our reality, right? When you have parents and you don't feel that you are meeting up to your parents' expectations, you get really messed up kids
Yes.
that never feel good enough.
Right.
So if you never feel good enough, you're not gonna shine. You're not gonna shine what you are, your light, your specialness that is unique to you. So it's a bad policy in regular life, and it's a bad policy when you're going into prayer to talk to your father.
Can you say that prayer one more time, though, please?
It says, Lord, I am not worthy to receive you, but only say the word, and I shall be healed.
There's so many other layers to that, though.
Right.
When you're saying, I'm not, Lord, I am not worthy to receive you, that could be an articulation of the human condition. Here I am on this planet with all my sins and problems, and I'm in this vessel at this time, which I believe as a spirit I signed myself up for. So it's an acknowledgement of human condition, but just say the word logos. Right? In the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word, by the way, was God. So there's a power to the word. So there's like a lot of different interesting things that are there, but it really depends on, it always comes back to your concept of self. Who are you in that prayer that you're saying?
Yes.
Are you saying that prayer in acknowledgement of incarnation, acknowledgement of life, acknowledgement of this is the vessel, this is the instrument that I am, but are you also activating the word? Are you also knowing that you are worthy to come to you and ask for what it is that you want? And see, even the Bible says, ask and it shall be given, but there's a kind of way to ask. When you come to it begging, wretch like me begging, he that hath, more is given. He that hath not, more is taken away. So if you go into the prayer having not, and just an abject vibration of lack and what your wish unfulfilled, then you can only ever create from lack. So it is about priming yourself and conditioning yourself to hath before you even start to pray. That's kind of a mind F, if you ask me, because you're asking for something. You want something to create it because obviously you don't have it right now. But unless you can get into the mind state and the vibration of, I do have it though. I do have it though. Your prayer isn't successful. So it's about finding, that's why lying down, head is in alignment with your body and making sure you can get into state and cancel out what the world is telling you is imperative.
Absolutely.
Because the world is telling you who you are, and the scale is telling you how much you weigh, and my bank account is telling me how much I'm worth. Unless I can develop the facility to turn away from that and recognize it as the illusion that it is, and go into my closet with my Father in secret, and be in that space, which is all inside of me, I can't actually create it.
Completely agreed. And it is very difficult in the extent that you are doing something, it's like counterintuitive, right? If I had it, why would I be asking for it? Right? If I was that, why would I be here asking for that? But something interesting that I read today when I was preparing and asking myself that question about prayer, right? Like, what does it really mean? And I think it was in Wikipedia or something. It said it's an invocation that seeks to activate a rapport with an object of worship through deliberate communication. And I really like that.
Say it again. I'm sorry. I like to say stuff twice. Can you say that again?
Prayer is an invocation or act, which I thought was interesting. Invocation or act that seeks to activate a rapport. And that word we can interpret in many ways, right? With an object of worship through deliberate communication. Deliberate communication. So there's quite a lot of, and then they go on to say, in the narrow sense, the term refers to an act of supplication or intercession directed towards a deity. So that is their sort of generalized interpretation of prayer. And we are taking now and condensing all kinds of prayer, Christian prayer, Buddhist prayer, whatever you want to say, like New Age prayer, however, but it involves some of this. And I think what's beautiful is that when I think of invoking something, it's almost like I'm calling forth something that I have a right to call forth. I'm calling on something that is me, that belongs to me, that I have a right to do, right? So I'm calling it forth, and I'm calling it forth, and I want to vibrate like it. I want to connect within it. I want to have that rapport with it. I want to match it. So for me, when I imagine what Neville's saying is, we have to we have to invoke it. We have to speak to that within us, to that God force, God, mother, father, whatever you want to call it. And then we've got to raise ourselves into a rapport. into that wish fulfilled, into that place where all things are possible. And when we are there, communicate with that energy and really flesh it out. So here's my wish, and let me talk to you about it. The way you would to a friend when something great happened to you, right? You're like, oh, I bought a new car. Let me tell you about it. It's red, and I get to do this with it, and I get to do that. So God, the creator, wants to share in the story, wants to be included. The thing is, we keep including him in really bad stories that we keep telling. And I'm sure they're not very fun for the creator. They're like, we're going to tell this one again? All right, here we go. Let's do it one more time, Joe,
Right.
So for me, I think that's what Neville is saying. It's like, hey, let's invoke this power. Let's build a rapport with it. Let's match it. And then let's communicate with it. And if we do that, then we're going to be able to have our wish fulfilled.
It's what we were talking about last week when Neville quoted scripture talking about he calls things that are unseen as though they were, and the unseen becomes visible. And so we kind of tried to break it down last week, but you did it so beautifully just now, like getting to the state, getting to the level of rapport, and then the intentional communication, like lovingly interacting with and creating, like made manifest through your articulation of prayer, that which you are seeking to create but already have through the conversation that you're having with God and with yourself, because we feel ourselves to have a state of lack, but as our higher self, as our soul self, we have access to all things, infinite resources. It's that we identify ourselves with Crystal and Compton, human being person, alive on this date, as opposed to identifying with the being that I truly am, that is the masterful creator, the ye are all gods that Jesus was speaking. That's me, and I have everything now. And so it's about shifting out of what the senses are telling you is real and back into, I have it all right now. I have it all right now. Hallelujah. Thank you, God. In me, I have it all right now.
That's right. And funny enough, last night I was trying to go to bed. I was like, okay, let me watch a YouTube video, something high vibe, right? Neville says high vibe. So I'm like, okay, let me put something. And I don't know why this Abraham Hicks video popped up, and it said, if you are watching this video, or if this video has appeared to you, it's because you're ready to hear what it says. And I'm like, well, I'm ready. So I clicked on it, and it's her talking to this gentleman, I guess, who attended one of her, one of their things. And she says, listen, your higher soul is always creating the highest thing for you. Always. It's always there. It's always speaking it. It's always holding it like a gift. The problem is that your personality, Elenique, Crystal, is having their own thoughts. And those thoughts are a lot of time driven by fear. So that thing of already having the wish fulfilled, it is already in you, but you have to access it. Like you have a Christmas present and now you're on a scavenger hunt, looking through door number 1 and 2 and 3, and maybe it's outside and maybe it's under the tree. It's somewhere, but you haven't found it yet. So that's what we're doing with this. I think if we think about it in that way, then it becomes more manageable for people. Like, well, if I'm already that, well, then why do I have to go look for it? No, you are already that. Your higher self is already holding that for you. But you've got to go find the door. You've got to turn down your noise and tune into higher self station.
Yes.
Right.
That is powerful, that your higher self is always creating the highest version of everything for you. Yes. That's so comforting to think of it that way.
It is.
Because
then you don't have to create, right? You are just accepting.
I am.
You're allowing. The higher self's already doing it, right? Personality, Elenique doesn't have to do it. Personality, Elenique just has to allow.
Right, which echoes Neville saying that the subconscious creates in a way known only to itself, meaning you're never going to know how it works as Crystal Ann Compton, human being person, and you don't need to. Like, you really don't need to, and that's just a problem anyway, because that's just a means for you to trip up and start getting worried about things. Like, so don't worry about how it's happening. Don't worry about how your higher self is creating all the awesome things that you could ever want in this life. Just know that it is, and conduct yourselves accordingly. That's
Yes.
the simplicity of it. It's simple, not always
Mhm.
easy, right? Because we get caught and trapped in the illusion. I
Yes.
wanted to say that as we were preparing for today, I wanted to think of like examples of prayer that have really impacted me. And a couple of things came to mind, if I may share.
Absolutely.
And a couple of them are actually from the Bible, and then one is just one of my own experiences. But I've I remember reading as a child. Would have had to have been around 14 or 15 when I was reading this story of Samuel, who is the prophet who ordained David, who of course killed Goliath, but like King David. But he was a prophet, Samuel, and his mother's name was Hannah. And she was married to a guy who had a lot of other wives who were just pushing out babies like it was their job nonstop. And here's Hannah, who couldn't conceive. And she was so torn up about it because all she wanted to do was to give her husband a child and to have a child herself. And, I spent about 7 or 8 years of my life thinking I was infertile and kind of going through the pain of not being able to conceive and just not wanting nothing more than to become pregnant and to have a child and being denied every month. And I know the pain of that. And so there's this part in this passage where Hannah goes to the temple. The priest of the temple is Eli, and she falls before the altar. And she's in such a state of bereavement, is that a word? Just so aggrieved. I can't, because she cannot have a child. And she's praying. And the prayer begins to transform from words that make sense to just body utterances, grunts and groans, wailing, crying. But it's still a language. She's
Mhm.
still talking to God. She's still asking for something. And Eli, the priest, comes upon her and thinks immediately, oh, she's drunk. She's intoxicated. Like, I got to get her out of the temple. But no, she's not. She's just having a profound moment of connection and supplication with God. And of course, the story goes in that prayer, she says, if you just give me a son, I'll commit him to you directly. And so she ends up having Samuel, and she gives Samuel immediately to Eli, and he becomes the prophet Samuel. And Eli's a whole nother Oprah we could get into one day. But he goes on, obviously, to be the prophet Samuel. But I just always felt like that's so intimate.
Mhm.
That's like a friend just pouring it all out. Like, these are my wounds. They're so deep that I can't
Yeah.
even say words anymore. It's just the
Mhm.
sound of my spirit. What I think we could actually call light language. Light language.
Yes.
This is your soul speaking. It doesn't have to make human sense. That was the first type of prayer that really made an impact on me and made me feel like I could have a personal relationship with God. And also, God hears me because God gave her Samuel. The
Mhm.
second instance of prayer was, of course, uh, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, Jesus also taught the disciples to pray, right? And gave them the Lord's Prayer, which is a very magical prayer, a very
Yes.
creative prayer. But it's the prayer that he utters in the Garden of Gethsemane. And again, he's in so much pain here, and we really see Christ as the human being man, 33 years old, who knows he's going to die tomorrow. And in Gethsemane, he asks his two disciples who are with him, can you just stay up with me? I'm
Mhm.
scared. I'm freaking out a
Mhm.
little bit. I just need some friends. They promptly fall asleep. And so it's just Jesus. And he enters into the prayer where he asks God to take this cup from him, which we've
Mhm.
discussed. And he ends it with, but thy will be done. Like the
Yes.
supreme and most beautiful capitulation of self. Like, I understand, though, like your prayer that you uttered, I understand that I'm asking, I'm understanding though that it's your will ultimately that's done. And I
Mhm.
just, for years and years and years, especially as I was a Christian, I always went back in my mind and in my meditation to Gethsemane because that was the Jesus that I related to so very much, so very much. And I wish I could
Yes.
have just been there with him just sitting there with him. I just wish I could have, it just makes me feel so many things
Mhm.
right now
Mhm.
because I think we all feel that way sometimes.
Yes.
We're just like, this sucks, man.
Mhm.
I can't believe this thing just happened. And
Yeah.
please help me. But if you can't, I get it. I just thought it was really wonderful prayer. And then there's an example that I have, which is very similar, which is maybe why I've chosen all these types of prayers, which seem very sad. But my father had died. And my father was so iconic to me, the great antagonist of my life. just a complicated person. And he died very young. He was younger than me. He was 52 when he passed, and it was a pulmonary embolism. So he passed while he slept, and nobody saw it coming. And I was just devastated when he passed. And it was my first experience with somebody leaving the world. I'd never had that before. And I just was so, so sad. And I remember just falling to my knees in my apartment in Hawaii and just bent over, just crying and praying for my dad, because he died and I thought he was not saved. And so I was very torn up about that because I was a Christian, right? And just pouring out. And it became like Hannah's prayer for me. It was the first time I had ever in my life transitioned from praying in a way that was conscious to praying just with the sounds of my body and my spirit. You know, just, I love you, Dad. I just pray for you. And I want you to be happy, and I want you to be at peace. And I wasn't saying the words, though. I was just communing with that which I was desiring to create for myself and for my father through God, who I believed in, you know, just a human moment. And that was a powerful prayer. And prayer can be like that. But I've also, honey, I've marched into prayer too. Okay. Like, who is it? Joseph with the horn, Jericho, right? I've marched into prayer too. I have marched in, I've cleared things. I've called in healing. But there's something very special to me about being utterly brokenly human and just laying prostrate before God, who loves me anyway, white as snow, come just as you are. And that's the beauty of God, and that's the beauty of being human as well, and of this life.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that scene with Jesus in Gethsemane. I always would think about that, but it would make me cry.
Me too.
When I was a little kid, and I remember reading that story, and I was like, why did they leave him alone? Like, why wasn't I there with Jesus, you know, to keep him company? Because this idea of having this weight of this abandonment after everything that you've done, right? You came to bring the light. You've been a teacher. You've done the miracles. And now this one time that you ask for something for you, and he's alone, you know? So I just remember being so moved by that and so sad. And even now when you were telling it, like my eyes get teary because like I feel it. I feel that moment. And I think I feel it because we've all experienced that as well. You know, we've had that moment when we think we've showed up for people, and then the moment when you really need them. And the thing I discovered through the things that have happened, and especially when my son passed away, as you know, is that who was there for me was God. That is who was there for me. I mean, I had friends and I had family members, but the only person that I could be with that understood what I was feeling was God. It was just like I felt like there was an embrace, like a cocoon, and I just crawled up in there and said, you know, Lord, wrap me up in your arms, because I can't do this. I cannot do it. And I can't explain it, and I don't want to talk about it. I just need like shelter. You know, I need love. And that's exactly what I got. And so I think, like you said, those unspoken prayers are sometimes even more powerful than anything you could ever utter, because honestly, language is a very human thing, right? And language a lot of times is creates separation, because we reduce concepts and ideas down to words, which is just a representation of a truth. It can never be the truth. You can't take something real and reduce it to a word. So when we're able to be with God in that place where there are no more words, just desire, just the feeling, and trusting that your father, your creator, your mother understands you, feels you, and will answer you, then you have something so deep and so beautiful and experiential, you know, beyond the mind.
Yes. You were recounting that, and I'm getting emotional too. But that's the power of prayer. And you know what? I believe prayer works. And I've been saying, I'm not the first to say, but I believe that if we come together, especially if we join our hearts and make sacred agreements, you know, Jesus said, if you and I agree on this earth about anything, good, bad, or indifferent, our Father in heaven is going to get up and give it to us.
Yes.
That's the law and the prophets. That's just how it works. That's how the universe works. That's how manifestation works. But you and I first have to enter into that with intention, consciousness, thinking mind, masculine, which Neville would say. We have to agree with the feeling of it,
Yes.
that it already is. And here we go. Our Father in heaven is dancing. He's given it to us. That's the power of prayer. And I think prayer can change absolutely anything. And when you get into prayer for others, there's a scripture and I can't find it. And by the way, it was Joshua went to battle against Jericho.
Okay.
What it was one of those J guys. But when you get into scripture, there is, I'm going to look for it this week. And I think it was Paul who was talking about the power of your prayer for somebody who's not saved. The power, which, we're not going to get into salvation doctrine. That's not what we're talking about. Who doesn't know peace, who doesn't know God's grace, who doesn't know the possibility of the divine. You can intercede in such a dynamic way on behalf of somebody else. And Neville actually talks about this throughout his works. And in some of it, it sounds like you can actually go back in time travel through the imaginal chamber. And I can actually pray for my father by going back in time and remembering him in a feeling way that is magnetic and vibrational, have a new kind of conversation with him, broker a new kind of peace and understanding. And I believe that sets me free in the now. When I do that, make that peace with my father from 40 years ago, and wherever he is, he gets the benefit of that too. You can do that with ancestors. You can do that with your line. You can do that with your future, your kids, their kids. Like, you can pray in all kinds of amazing ways. But again, it's about who you believe you are when you enter into prayer. When you're wrapping yourself up in the love of God, you're a child of God. You are God's beloved. God's got you. And that's what I think Christ was talking about and Neville's referring to when he's saying, go in your closet where nobody else is. They don't know where you are. I don't know where mom went. You're curled in a closet in the quiet, just you and God. That's the ideal place to create. And sometimes it's just the ideal place to be comforted and just to remember, okay, there's a reason I'm here. Okay, there's a reason I got to go on today and I got to do the things that I need to do.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's beautiful. And I love how Neville has been able to explain that to us in a way that is so simple yet so profound. The instructions are very simple, but like you said, simple doesn't make it easy, right? So we have to practice, which is why next week is so important and why we were so committed to producing this ebook for our listeners, because we want you to have the experience of this, right? We don't want them or us to just have the theory of this. The theory does us no good. It brings us no peace. We want to have this experience and know ourselves to be those creators that we are, and that we are co-creating with an unlimited field of possibility.
Yes. And the scripture says, walk by faith and not by sight. But I want to emphasize the walk part. Like, you have to move. You got to do it. You got to do it. And it is a theory, and we can talk about it all day and get all, knowledgeable about all the things. But if you're not applying it, and if you're not working the mechanics of manifestation, then you are not going to see the evidences of it. And the screen of your life, your tomorrows, are going to continue to show you in just a different version of everything that you've already gotten. So if you want something new, you got to walk by faith. You've got to walk it.
But how many of us don't do that all the time? We know what we're supposed to eat, but we don't eat it. We know we have to
You're calling me out again.
I'm sorry. No, but I have that too. Like, it's like, I know what I'm supposed to eat in the morning, right? And I'm like, why don't you have that green juice? Just drink the green juice. And the voice is telling me and saying outside of me this guidance, green juice, right? It's gonna feel so good. But then you're like, I have a bagel. Right? With cream cheese.
You are calling me out.
Give me the cream cheese.
All of it.
So it's this thing that we want something, and yet we don't want it at the same time. And I think that's why the Four Agreements is going to be so powerful, because we're going to deal with that shadow aspect of us that doesn't want it. There's a part that wants and a part that doesn't want. That's a lot what I see when we do parts work. When I do parts work with people in hypnotherapy, what is that part that's sabotaging you? It's just as real. right? So we need to talk to that part and figure out, why are you doing this? So we can step into wholeness, because from wholeness, we can manifest anything.
Mm-hmm. This was good.
I
This
agree.
was juicy.
It was so juicy.
I mean, yeah. And I think we need to remind ourselves of this power. And
Yes.
again, the kingdom of God is within you.
Hmm.
It's not going to be within somebody else. It's not going to be external to anything that you got going on. It is all inside of you. You have the apparatus. You have all of the tools. You came here with your tool bag and with a map and a blueprint, and all of your innate gifts and talents are within you now. Maybe not activated, right? Maybe
Right.
you don't know, maybe not conscious to
Hmm.
them, but you truly, 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 truly do have all of this inside of you right now. So now go walk. Go walk in
Yes.
faith.
I love it. Walk in faith. We need t-shirts.
We do.
Yeah.
Merch.
Yeah.
We can get some merch, baby.
Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. Are we doing a meditation this week, or what do we do? What do you think
I'm
about that?
Well, I want to create, I actually wanted to create one separately. I'm going to send it to you because
Okay.
I believe that prayer is something. I don't want it to feel like a regular meditation. I want to
Mm-hmm.
create something for people that they can really do alone. So instead of more of a meditation, it's going to be more a how to, a little
Okay.
how to.
Okay.
So we will add that. We will
Okay.
attach it to, in a separate little file, but it's going to run a little differently. I'm not going to do the same types of leading into meditation,
Mm-hmm.
and more an explanation of how do you talk to someone that you want to get to know better, that you trust, and with whom you want to create something. Right. So, an
Mm.
experience of building trust, because I really think that at the end of the day, the reason why prayer is difficult for people is because ultimately they have a lot of doubt about whether anyone's actually listening. So, what we need to do is build that trust. When we have trust, then talking to God, to Source, will be easy. So, that's what
Mm.
we will be preparing for them, an exercise in trust.
So let's get a timeline for people. Do you think that'll be available when this podcast drops, or do you
Yeah.
maybe within the week of that? Like we don't want to
Yes,
rush
yes,
you.
yes,
Okay.
yes. No, no,
All right.
no.
So,
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
All right. So if you're listening to this or if you're watching this, um, is it going to be in video form as well, or is it going to be just an
It's
audio
just going to
file?
be
And
audio.
okay, so if you're watching on YouTube right now, this should incentivize you to look at the link in the description. Well, actually, wherever you enjoy your podcast, just
Yes,
look up our podcast, Miraculous Thinking, and you'll find it. And so it'll be a file added to the podcast, not to YouTube. So go look
exactly.
for it there. And if you're in our Facebook group, by the way, because we have one,
Yeah.
we're special.
Yes.
And we can upload a file there too. So if you're in the
Yes.
Facebook group, we'll make sure to upload it there so you can access it as well.
And that's what we're going to try to do, right? Keep everything, a lot of the different tools and things in that Facebook group. That's why it's such a good thing for people to join, because a lot of the materials and worksheets and prompts that we're going to start doing with some of these things for journaling and exploring, we're going to put them in the Facebook group under, I believe it's files and materials. They have like a couple of links there.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
I know not everyone's on Facebook, but if you are on Facebook, you should join us. And if you're not on Facebook, you might want to think about joining us just because it's going to be so awesome.
And hopefully soon we're going to have our own website.
That's right. We are getting so organized.
Yes.
We are getting
Very.
organized. We're having conversations. We are creating in the imagination because it has to be done in the imagination before it
That's right.
crystallizes into the physicality. But we got it going and we are moving in that direction. But we've just started. This is our first month. I think we're doing great
I think so
for our
too. Pat on the
first month.
back.
I have to tell you, I love you so much.
I love you too, Miss
No, and
Crystal.
I want to thank you because I really can't have. Well, that's I need to change my languaging. I don't normally have conversations with people that understand what I'm saying, allow me to be funny, right, or make
Oh,
jokes. You know, sometimes people think, well, if you're a spiritual teacher, then you can't be funny or have any sin or trans. But you allow me to be exactly as I am. But I'm so grateful because you teach me You teach me. You teach me. And it's not that I'm not teachable or that I'm so high it's hard to teach me, but there's something about you and the countenance and carriage of it all, the way that you hold yourself vibrationally, that just makes it easy for me to get into presence and to learn. So I just
Don't
want to
make
thank
me,
you for
you're gonna
that.
make me emotional.
No,
Don't
I
make me
love you.
emotional. I
I
can't
love you.
handle it right
I
now.
love you. I'm just saying, I love you. I know everybody else out there loves you as well. So
Oh,
thank you.
well, I feel the same way. And I just really appreciate that we're able to do this together, and we're all here to do this together, right?
Mhm.
We're all here to teach one another. And that's what the Course in Miracles says. It says the teacher is the person who temporarily has more, and the student is the person who temporarily has less. And so the teacher is just sharing from the little bit more that they have to those that temporarily have less, because we all have it all. It's just we've forgotten. So
See what I'm saying? That's what I mean. I've got goosebumps. I'm thinking of myself, I've got to make a quote of that on the video because that's so good. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
thank you.
And I
And
guess,
thank you, listeners.
oh, absolutely. I know people are vibing with this, and more people are going to come, and we're going to have a circle of conscious people who are absolutely in love with learning and continuing to do so. But until next week, I guess everybody have a beautiful week. Do what you can to walk in faith, honey, not by sight, but by faith. Turn
Walk
away
by
from the
faith.
senses and get into that closet with your Father. I love you all.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye.